my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about Sister of Mine by Lori Petro. I hope I'm saying her last name right, but let's just jump on into it. This book is, as the title would tell you, it's a story about sisters. It's about two sisters in particular, Hattie and Penny. I have a sister myself, and I constantly find myself drawn to stories about sisters. I love reading about that dynamic. So right off the bat, that kind of attracted me to it. From the blurb on the back, I was sort of expecting a bit of a thriller, but it's not really that. There's definitely an air of mystery to the novel, but it's less of a, trying to solve what happened, although we're waiting to find out what exactly happened. The book itself is more about what do you do after something really big and bad has happened. How do you move on? How do you live your life? And these two sisters are having a very difficult time doing it. So right from the get-go, here's what we think happened. And it's what happens in the very first chapter. Penny has a husband, and he's a bad man. He's abusive, he's cruel, he's awful. And at the beginning of the book, we see who we think is Penny returning to the home where, her family home, where her and her sister grew up, having just set fire to her marriage home where she lives with her husband. And her intent is to kill him. And she does. So we start off with that sort of big bang, and then we're taken back a bit into the history of these girls a bit. When they were very young, their dad left. There's this scene where, they thought they had a great life, and then one day the younger sister steals a pair of earrings that her mom wouldn't let her borrow. They're her mom's earrings. And so she steals these earrings and she gives them to her older sister as sort of like, look, here, now you have them. And that night, their parents fight over the earrings. The mom accuses the husband of having stole them, and it never occurs to her to even ask her daughters, but and later that the older sister uses that fact against the younger sister, being like, well, you're the reason he left, because if you hadn't stolen mom's earrings, he wouldn't have left. What an absolutely horrific thing to say to a child. Even if it is said by another child, what a horrible thing. And you can't unhear that, you sort of carry that around with you forever. So that happens, and then it's the three of them, the two girls and their mom, and eventually the older sister goes off to college. The younger sister doesn't like being left behind, as most younger siblings do not like, and she starts going into the city to visit her sister on the weekends, and she's just partying, and she's a distraction to Penny, the older sister. And eventually Penny calls their mom, and she's like, you have to stop letting her come into the city on the weekends. She's a nuisance, she's a distraction, she's gonna get herself in trouble. So that pretty much ends the visits. What happens after that is one afternoon while Hattie is sulking and very upset that she can't go to the city, she's up in her room, she's got her headphones on, she's, angsty, listening to music, and the mom is outside gardening, and while the mom is gardening, she gets stung by a bee, and she hadn't known that she was allergic to bee stings, and, she's calling out to Hattie, like, oh, help, I need help. She's sort of calling out, but Hattie's got her headphones on and she can't hear her. And then the mom passes away. And that all seemed a little dramatic. I guess, that's a thing that can happen, but it was just like, oh, okay. So now Penny has another thing to use against her younger sister, and it's like, you let mom die. And it's like, oh, what? So we're starting to set up this this precedent that Hattie is this younger sister who's just abused emotionally a lot by her older sister Penny. And so the story's kind of told from Penny's point of view, and I just didn't find Penny to be a very sympathetic narrator. You know, a lot of things she did, I was just kind of like, oh, that's a pretty crappy thing to do to a young sister. You know, and we're not just talking about, you know, picking on her or playing jokes on her, or, you know, it's saying things like, you're the reason our mom's dead and you're the reason our dad left. And it's like, oh, I'm having trouble really getting on Penny's side here. So because of this, Penny leaves school in the city and comes home to their, you know, family home to live with Hattie and help take care of her, although she doesn't want to. And shortly after that, she meets the husband, and they get married, and the abuse of him to her begins. It kind of goes on back and forth for a while with, there's a police officer in town, and he's kind of got his eye on the family. You know, he's trying to, not that he's suspicious of either of them, but that, you know, he wants to solve this crime so that Penny can have some closure, not knowing that she had a very big part in everything that happened. And then there's just a bunch of other stuff happens, like at Penny's job, she meets this man named Jameson, who she really likes, and she brings him home for dinner one day. You know, she's got a big interest in him, but then he starts to take an interest in her sister. And in her head, she's just kind of like, oh yeah, of course, everyone likes Hattie better. But it's like, yeah, of course. Hattie and Jameson begin their relationship. Penny eventually just sort of puts it aside, and she's happy for them. And after a bit of time passes, Hattie realizes that she wants to start a family with Jameson. But then after trying for a while, she realizes that she can't get pregnant. And so they ask Penny if she would be a surrogate for them. And Penny's not really sure. She's like, you know, that's a big thing. I don't know. I don't think I can do it. Then a few more months pass, and they have this New Year's Eve party, and at the end of the night, after everyone's gone and most people are gone to bed, Penny wakes up from having passed out drunk earlier, goes downstairs, sees Jameson sitting on the couch, and one thing leads to another, and they end up being intimate together. Then the next morning, you know, he never mentions it again, and she just kind of feels real awkward living with them now. Because by this point, Jameson, if not officially living there, he's there every night. So she's like, okay, I can't stay. This is too awkward now. So she gets her own apartment. And she lives there, and then a few weeks later, she finds out that she's pregnant. So what does she do? She calls Hattie and says she changed her mind about being a surrogate, and she would now like to. And so they go and they do the insemination process at home with a actual turkey baster, and then Penny just sort of crosses her fingers that Hattie doesn't do the math and figure out that she's more pregnant than she should be. Well, time goes on, she has the baby, and there's just a lot of really dramatic things happening in a really short period of time. So she has the baby. After she gives birth, she's like, you know what, I'm gonna take off because I don't want to be here. It's too awkward, because she, you know, she was the one who at the beginning had feelings for Jameson. Now she's had an affair with her sister's now husband. So she gets out of there, she goes to Paris. She stays there for 4 years. Eventually, Jameson calls and says, Hattie's having a nervous breakdown. You have to come home. I was like, yeah, no kidding, Hattie's having a nervous breakdown. She's been through a lot. So Penny goes home, you know, the hero sister home to save the day. Even though she's the root of most of Hattie's problems, you know, she's the cause of 90% of them. So yeah, that's the main gist of it. It's these two sisters who are tangled up in each other. to the point of toxicity and trying to live a normal life after murdering, Penny's husband, and growing up just broken. Penny being so cruel to Hattie over and over, and Penny obviously being broken herself, because you don't go around being absolutely cruel to your sister for no reason as a child. So if you're interested in reading this, which, give it a try if you like. It's a fast-paced read. I blew through it in like a day. It's only 200 and some odd pages. It's written well. The writer, Lori, I think she's a talented writer. It was just the story, I would say, to me, it wasn't what I expected. And I didn't love some of the storylines, but I enjoyed the read. So yes, if you want to read it, click off now, because I'm going to tell the spoilers. You know how we do it here. So yeah, thanks for watching. For the rest of you, here's what else happens. So Penny returns home, and as Jameson had warned her, Hattie is on the verge, if not in the middle, of a full-on breakdown. And once Penny's back for a bit, Hattie sort of just freaks out and is like, you know what, you're this kid's actual mother, I'm leaving, and she takes off for a while. Penny slips into mom role, even though to this child she's known as Aunt Penny. Jameson moves out, and Penny and the child, who's now, not a baby anymore, he's 4, they build a relationship, they build a life, and then eventually Hattie comes back and just sort of wants to get right back into the mother role, even though, she had bailed for a bit, but, maybe that's what she needed. And after everything that had happened, I don't know, like that sort of situation I find, it's hard to judge, because who knows what we would do if we were in her position. I could never imagine leaving my child for an extended period of time, but, you deal with things how you deal with them. So Hattie comes back. In the interim, the child, whose name was Elliot, has developed a fascination with fire, because one day Penny had told him about how her husband had perished in a fire. As time goes on, Elliot becomes a teenager. He starts setting fires all over town as a way of acting out, and then eventually one day the police officer who had been handling the fire case brings him home one day, and he's like, this kid's out of control, you gotta figure that out. Finally, we get to the point where we find out what happened that night, the night of the fire. So Penny had been telling her husband, Buddy, that she was going to go spend the night at her sister's house. They were going to watch movies. She was going to have a sleepover. It was going to be great. So she knows he drinks a lot. He was an alcoholic. So she takes some sleeping pills and she puts them into his beer. And he drinks. He passes out. She's getting ready to set the fire, and then she can't do it. So she goes to Hattie's, and she tells her, she says, I couldn't do it. And Hattie's like, Kate, I'll do it. So that's what she does. The whole time we were sort of thinking Penny had been the one that started the fire, but it had been Hattie who, in a move to save her sister's life, more or less, had went and started the fire that night, and it had been her who had been coming home at the beginning of the book. So in the end, in the very, very end, the police officer knows that something, he's starting to put the pieces together. Even though, it's been years and years and years since the fire, it never went out of his mind. It had always bothered him, like, what happened? And he starts to put the pieces together, and he comes for Hattie. And at the last minute, sort of Penny's like, no, it was me. And I guess that's her, her way of trying to help heal Hattie by taking the fall. Because, Hattie had Elliot, and just, I think, too, just all the cruel things that Penny did to her when they were little. I'm really stuck on that. Penny saying, you're the reason our father left, you're the reason our mother died. Like, what? I can't get past that. It's wild to me that you would, that she would intentionally say things like that to hurt her, because you never forget. So there you go, you guys. If that sounds interesting at all to you, definitely check out Sister of Mine. Like I said, it was a fast read. It kept me wanting to figure out what the heck happened, who's done what's going on. And although it's definitely an extreme, over-the-top version, it's also a look at the ties that bind us to the people that we love. And I always find those complex family relationships so interesting. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching, you guys. And I will see you on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend.